The Land of Vlad the Impaler, A History of Wallachia and Transylvania. Part 1. The Myth and the Reality. For centuries, a name has haunted our collective imagination. A name whispered in shadows, a legend born of blood and fear, Dracula. From the pages of Bram Stoker's Gothic masterpiece, to the silver screen, the vampire count has staked his claim as the ultimate symbol of terror. But what if the true story is even more compelling, more brutal, and far more human than any fiction could conjure? Long before the fangs and the cape, there was a man. A prince, a warrior, Vlad III Dracula, Vlad the Impaler. And his story is inextricably woven into the very fabric of the lands he ruled, Wallachia and Transylvania. These are not merely settings for a Gothic tale. These are lands steeped in millennia of history, cradled by the majestic Carpathian Mountains, crossroads of empires, battlegrounds for survival. This is where cultures clashed, where faiths collided, and where the course of European history was frequently decided by the strength of a sword and the will of a prince. To understand Vlad, we must first understand his homeland. Not just the physical geography, but the deep historical currents that shaped its people, its politics, and its perpetual struggle for independence. We must journey back, far beyond the 15th century, to a time when these lands were born from a fusion of ancient civilizations. Scene 2. Deciphering the name, Dracula, visuals, close-ups of historical texts, old coins, a detailed genealogical chart for Vlad Tepes. The name itself, Dracula, is often misunderstood. In popular culture, it evokes images of the demonic, but its origins lie not in the infernal, but in the imperial. Vlad III's father, Vlad II, was inducted into the prestigious Order of the Dragon, a chivalric order founded by Sigismund of Luxembourg, King of Hungary and later Holy Roman Emperor. Its purpose? To defend Christendom against the encroaching Ottoman Empire. The order's symbol was a dragon. And so, Vlad II earned the moniker, Dracul, meaning, the dragon. In Old Romanian, Dracula simply means, son of the dragon. A title of inherited nobility, a badge of honor, a symbol of a warrior lineage sworn to defend the faith. Yet, as centuries passed, the word, drac, evolved in the Romanian language, acquiring a second, more sinister meaning, devil. This linguistic twist, combined with Vlad III's brutal reputation, cemented the fateful connection that Bram Stoker would later exploit. The son of the dragon became, for the Western world, the son of the devil. Scene 3. A land forged in fire, ancient roots. But the story of Wallachia and Transylvania begins long before any dragons or devils. It begins with the ancient Dacians, fierce and formidable warriors, inhabitants of a rich, forested land that lay strategically on the fringes of the expanding Roman Empire. In the 2nd century AD, after epic struggles documented on Trajan's column in Rome, the Dacian kingdom was conquered by Emperor Trajan, becoming the Roman province of Dacia. This conquest was a watershed moment, forever altering the cultural and linguistic landscape. Though Roman rule was relatively brief, lasting less than 2 centuries, its impact was profound. The Dacian language faded, replaced by vulgar Latin. The people became Romanized, planting the seeds for what would eventually become the Romanian language and national identity, a Romance island in a Slavic sea. After the Roman withdrawal, these lands became a highway for successive waves of migratory peoples, Goths, Huns, Avars, Slavs, Pechenegs, Cumans. Each left their mark, adding layers to the region's complex ethnic and cultural tapestry. This period, often called the Dark Ages, was a crucible where distinct communities began to coalesce. Out of this turmoil, around the 10th to 13th centuries, distinct political entities began to emerge. In the south, the Romanians, or Vlachs as they were known, started to form small, independent polities. In the north, the Hungarian kingdom asserted its dominance over Transylvania. Part 2. The Shaping of Principalities. Scene 4. Transylvania, a land divided. Transylvania, meaning, the land beyond the forest, was, by the High Middle Ages, firmly under the control of the Hungarian crown. But it was not a homogeneous land. Its very geography, ringed by the Carpathians, fostered a unique, multi-ethnic society. Hungarian kings actively encouraged settlement by various groups to develop the region and secure its borders. Among the most prominent were the Transylvanian Saxons, German colonists invited in the 12th and 13th centuries. They brought advanced agricultural techniques, skilled craftsmanship, and a vibrant urban culture. Their fortified churches and bustling towns became vital economic and defensive strongholds. Alongside the Saxons were the Hungarians themselves, forming the ruling elite and nobility, building formidable castles and cathedrals. The Seklers, a distinct Hungarian-speaking group with a unique military tradition, were settled along the eastern frontiers, serving as border guards against nomadic incursions. And, of course, the Romanians, the descendants of the Romanized Dacians, constituted the majority population. Yet, in Transylvania, their status was often that of serfs or landless peasants, politically marginalized, their Orthodox faith often tolerated but secondary to the Catholic and later Protestant churches of the other nations. This led to a unique social structure known as the Unio Trium Nationum, the Union of Three Nations. This political pact, formed in the 15th century, recognized the Hungarian nobility, the Saxon burghers, and the Sekler military class as the privileged, ruling entities. The Romanians, despite their demographic majority, were excluded from political power. This inherent inequality would fuel tensions for centuries. Scene 5. Wallachia, the southern principality. South of the Carpathians, stretching down to the Danube, lay Wallachia, the Romanian land. Unlike Transylvania, Wallachia was able to achieve independent statehood, forging its own destiny in the turbulent medieval landscape. The consolidation of Wallachia began in earnest in the early 14th century under Basarab I. His decisive victory over the Hungarian King Charles I in 1330 at the Battle of Posada was a foundational moment, securing Wallachia's independence and establishing its place on the map of medieval Europe. Wallachia's independence was not just political, it was also cultural and religious. Adhering to the Eastern Orthodox Church, the principality developed its own distinct cultural identity, fostering a rich tradition of Byzantine art, architecture, and religious literature. The monasteries became centers of learning and national pride. However, Wallachia's geographic position, at the crossroads of major empires, was both a blessing and a curse. It lay on crucial trade routes, bringing wealth and cultural exchange. But it also made it a perennial battleground, caught between the ambitions of powerful neighbors, the Kingdom of Hungary to the north and west, and the ever-expanding, formidable Ottoman Empire to the south. By the 14th and 15th centuries, the Ottoman threat loomed large. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 sent shockwaves through Europe, signaling a new era of Ottoman dominance. For Wallachia, this meant a constant struggle for survival, balancing diplomacy with defiance, paying tribute when necessary, and fighting fiercely for its very existence. Scene 6. The Draculesti and Dynasty, a dynasty of conflict. Wallachia's independence was a fragile thing, not only threatened by external powers but also by relentless internal strife. The principality was plagued by a fierce succession struggle between rival noble factions, primarily two branches of the Basarab dynasty, the Dynasty and the Draculesti. This was not a genteel political rivalry. It was a brutal, often bloody, power struggle for the throne. Princes were constantly being overthrown, exiled, assassinated, or replaced by rival claimants supported by neighboring powers, especially Hungary or the Ottomans, who both sought to install compliant rulers. Vlad III's own father, Vlad II Dracula, was a product of this volatile environment. He ascended to the Wallachian throne in 1436, navigating a treacherous path between the powerful Kingdom of Hungary and the rising Ottoman Sultanate. He was often forced to pay tribute to the Ottomans to secure his throne, a pragmatic if humiliating necessity. In 1444, a desperate act of diplomacy sealed the fate of Vlad II's young sons. To secure peace and protect his reign, he sent his two youngest boys, Vlad and Radu, as political hostages to the court of the Ottoman Sultan Murad II. It was a common, if harrowing, practice of the time, a guarantee of loyalty. For young Vlad, then barely a teenager, this exile would be profoundly transformative, shaping the man he would become. Part 3. The Birth of a Legend, Vlad III Dracula. Scene 7. The Ottoman Crucible, Vlad's hostage years. For years, Vlad and his younger brother Radu lived as hostages within the heart of the Ottoman Empire. This was no ordinary captivity. They were educated, exposed to the intricacies of Ottoman politics, military tactics, and culture. They learned Turkish, Arabic, and the ways of a truly formidable power. But beneath the veneer of privilege lay the ever-present threat. They were pawns in a geopolitical game, their lives dependent on their father's allegiance. They witnessed firsthand the absolute power of the Sultan, the ruthless efficiency of the Ottoman war machine, and the brutal consequences for those who defied it. This period instilled in Vlad a deep understanding of power, a profound mistrust, and a chilling resolve. While Vlad was immersed in the Ottoman world, tragedy struck his family back home. In 1447, his father, Vlad II Dracula, was assassinated, and his older brother Mircea was brutally blinded and buried alive by forces loyal to the dynasty faction, likely with Hungarian backing. Vlad was left with nothing but a burning desire for revenge. Scene 8. First Reign, a brief, bloody introduction. In 1448, with Ottoman support, Vlad made his first attempt to seize the Wallachian throne. It was a brief and bloody affair, lasting only a few months before he was overthrown by the dynasty prince, Vladislav II, supported by Hungary. This early failure reinforced the harsh lessons of his youth. Power was fleeting, and ruthlessness was often the only path to survival. Vlad spent years in exile, honing his political acumen and military strategy, patiently awaiting his moment. He cultivated alliances, learned from past mistakes, and meticulously planned his return. He had witnessed the instability of Wallachia, the treacherous nature of its boyars, nobles, and the constant threat from both east and west. He knew that to truly rule, he had to instill order and fear. Scene 9. The Return, securing the throne. His opportunity came in 1456. With a complex interplay of Hungarian support, under János Hunyadi, and a desire to curb Ottoman expansion, Vlad III once again marched on Wallachia. This time, he was prepared. He decisively defeated and killed Vladislav II, finally securing his rightful place as Prince of Wallachia. But this was not just a victory, it was a declaration. Vlad III Dracula would not be another weak, easily deposed ruler. He would be an absolute authority, and he would tolerate no dissent. Scene 10. The Reign of Terror, Order Through Fear. Vlad's second, and most significant, reign, 1456 to 1462, would become legendary for its uncompromising brutality. He inherited a principality riddled with corruption, lawlessness, and a powerful, treacherous nobility, the boyars, who often shifted allegiances for personal gain. Vlad's solution was simple, yet terrifying: absolute terror. One of his most infamous acts was the extermination of a significant portion of the old Wallachian nobility. Accounts describe a legendary Easter feast where Vlad invited hundreds of boyars and their families. After questioning their loyalty and their role in the constant unrest, he had them seized. The older boyars were impaled on the spot, the younger, forced into slave labor, building his new fortress at Panari, often dying in the process. This seemingly indiscriminate cruelty had a calculated purpose: to crush internal opposition and establish an unchallengeable central authority. And it worked. Contemporary accounts, even from his enemies, confirm that under Vlad, crime plummeted. The story of the Golden Cup left untouched in the central market of Targoviste for weeks, a testament to the fear and order he instilled, is a powerful indicator of his effectiveness. Vlad's justice was swift and often gruesome. Thieves, vagrants, and anyone who challenged his decrees faced impalement, a slow, agonizing death. His conflicts with the Transylvanian Saxon merchants, who often circumvented his trade regulations, led to bloody reprisals, with thousands of Saxons reportedly impaled on the borders of Wallachia. These acts generated outrage and spread his fearsome reputation across Europe. Scene 11. The Anti-Ottoman Crusade, defying the Sultan. Yet, Vlad's most defining struggle was against the seemingly unstoppable might of the Ottoman Empire. Having paid tribute for years, Vlad decided to defy the Sultan Mehmed II, the very conqueror of Constantinople. It was an act of audacious defiance, seen by many as suicidal. In 1461, Vlad refused to pay the annual tribute and launched a series of brutal raids across the Danube, devastating Ottoman territories and massacring tens of thousands of Turks and Bulgarian Muslims. He sent a chilling letter to King Matthias Corvinus, proudly detailing his atrocities and boasting of the severed heads and impaled bodies of his enemies. Sultan Mehmed II, enraged by Vlad's defiance, personally led an enormous army, estimated at 90,000 to 120,000 men, possibly one of the largest in history up to that point, into Wallachia in 1462, determined to crush Vlad and annex his principality. Vlad, with a far smaller force, perhaps 20,000 to 30,000 men, knew he could not defeat the Ottomans in open battle. He resorted to a brutal and effective scorched earth campaign, poisoning wells, destroying crops, and launching guerrilla attacks, harassing the massive Ottoman army at every turn. His most audacious act was the night attack of June 17, 1462. Under the cover of darkness, Vlad and his hand-picked cavalry infiltrated the vast Ottoman encampment outside the Wallachian capital of Targoviste, attempting to assassinate the Sultan himself. Though they failed to reach Mehmed, they sowed immense panic and inflicted heavy casualties. The ultimate deterrent, however, awaited the exhausted Ottoman army as they approached Targoviste. There, stretching for miles, was the Forest of the Impaled, some 20,000 captured Ottoman soldiers and citizens, impaled on stakes, a horrific tableau designed to break the enemy's will. Even Sultan Mehmed II, hardened by years of war, was reportedly horrified, remarking that he could not conquer a man who used such methods. Scene 12. Betrayal and imprisonment. Despite the psychological victory, the overwhelming Ottoman numbers eventually forced Vlad to retreat. His younger brother, Radu the Handsome, who had remained loyal to the Ottomans and was known for his charm, was installed as the new Prince of Wallachia, appealing to many disillusioned boyars. Vlad fled north, seeking aid from his supposed ally, King Matthias Corvinus of Hungary. But Matthias, facing pressure from the Pope to explain why the promised anti-Ottoman crusade had stalled, and perhaps wary of Vlad's extreme methods and growing power, instead had Vlad arrested. Fabricated letters accusing Vlad of treachery against Hungary were used as justification. Vlad the Impaler, the ferocious defender of Wallachia, spent the next decade imprisoned in Hungary. His reign had ended, but his legend was just beginning to spread across Europe, fueled by propaganda both from his enemies and sensationalized accounts of his brutality. Part 4. The Enduring Legacy. Scene 13. The Last Stand and Death. In 1475, with Hungarian support, Vlad briefly regained the Wallachian throne for a third time, ready to resume his fight against the Ottomans. But his return was short-lived. In late 1476, or early 1477, Vlad was killed in battle, likely against Ottoman forces and Wallachian boyars loyal to Radu's successor. The exact circumstances of his death remain shrouded in mystery. Some accounts suggest he was killed by his own men who mistook him for an enemy, others that he was ambushed and beheaded. His head was reportedly sent to Constantinople as a grim trophy for Sultan Mehmed II, proof that the formidable Dracula was finally vanquished. His body, if not his head, is believed to have been buried at Snagov Monastery, though definitive archaeological proof remains elusive. Scene 14. From Prince to Vampire, the birth of a myth. Even during his lifetime, Vlad's reputation for extreme cruelty spread like wildfire across Europe, fueled by early printing presses. German pamphlets, designed to horrify and warn, recounted his impalements, mutilations, and tortures, often exaggerated for dramatic effect. Centuries later, in 1897, an Irish author named Bram Stoker stumbled upon these gruesome tales and historical accounts. Fascinated by the name, Dracula, and the dark history of the Carpathians, he crafted a Gothic masterpiece that would forever fuse the historical prince with the supernatural entity of the vampire. Stoker's Count Dracula, a parasitic nobleman from Transylvania, became an instant icon, transforming Vlad the Impaler from a medieval warlord into the archetypal undead villain. The legend grew, fueled by countless films, books, and pop culture adaptations, firmly cementing the vampire myth in the public consciousness. Scene 15. Wallachia and Transylvania beyond Vlad. Visuals. Evolution of Romanian nation-state. Map of Great Union, modern Romania. But the history of Wallachia and Transylvania did not end with Vlad the Impaler. For centuries, these lands continued their complex dance with powerful empires. Wallachia and its sister principality, Moldavia, endured under Ottoman suzerainty, maintaining a degree of autonomy while often struggling against foreign influence. Transylvania, meanwhile, remained an integral part of the Hungarian kingdom, and later the Austro-Hungarian Empire, until the dramatic redrawing of Europe's map after World War I. The 20th century finally saw the culmination of a centuries-long dream, the unification of all Romanian-speaking lands into a single nation-state, Romania. Wallachia and Transylvania, once divided by mountains and empires, were finally brought together, their shared history and identity forging a new future. Scene 16. Vlad in Romanian consciousness. In Romania, Vlad the Impaler is a far more complex figure than the Western vampire. He is not primarily a monster, but a national hero, a fierce defender of Wallachian independence against overwhelming odds, a stern enforcer of justice, and a symbol of resistance against foreign domination. His brutal methods, while acknowledged, are often contextualized within the harsh realities of 15th-century warfare and politics. For Romanians, His story is a testament to the resilience and unwavering spirit of a people determined to preserve their identity and sovereignty. Scene 17. Modern Romania, a land of history and future. Today, the lands of Wallachia and Transylvania are the beating heart of modern Romania. They are vibrant regions, rich in history, culture, and breathtaking natural beauty. Tourists flock to castles and medieval towns, drawn by the lingering echoes of the past, often seeking the thrill of the Dracula legend. The history of Wallachia and Transylvania invites us to look beyond the simple myth of the vampire. It asks us to confront the complex, brutal, and compelling reality of a prince who fought tyranny with terror, and who, in doing so, forged a lasting legacy of national pride. The land of Vlad the Impaler is a land where history, myth, and survival are eternally intertwined. The dragon's son may be gone, but the echo of his defiance still rings through the Carpathian Mountains, reminding us that sometimes the greatest monsters are forged not by the supernatural, but by the relentless forces of history. This detailed introduction and subsequent section outlines total approximately 3,500 words of narrative content, focusing heavily on the context, Vlad's early life, his rise, and his legendary defiance against the Ottomans. To reach the 10,000-word target, the remaining 6,500 words would need to fully flesh out the following remaining sections. Part 5. Transylvanian Influence and the Legacy of Impalement. Scene 18. The Transylvanian Shadow, Trade and Conflict. Vlad's reign was not solely defined by his struggle against the colossal Ottoman Empire. His grip on power was constantly challenged by his neighbors to the north, particularly within Transylvania. While historically part of the Kingdom of Hungary, the region's powerful Saxon merchant cities, like Brasov, Kronstadt, and Sibiu, Hermannstadt, operated with a high degree of autonomy. These Saxon cities were vital economic engines, controlling the lucrative trade routes that funneled goods between Central Europe and the Orient, often passing through Wallachia. For Vlad, this dependence was a source of both wealth and constant frustration. The Saxons often circumvented his customs laws and supported his rival claimants from the dynasty faction who were in exile in Transylvania. The exiled dynasty princes, protected by the Saxons, served as a perpetual, dagger-like threat to Vlad's stability. Their presence provided a convenient excuse for the Saxons to interfere directly in Wallachian politics whenever it suited their commercial interests. Vlad understood that he could never truly secure his southern flank against the Ottomans unless he first neutralized this northern instability. Vlad's response was swift and devastating. He viewed the Saxons not just as economic competitors, but as political conspirators threatening the very sovereignty he was brutally enforcing. Between 1456 and 1460, Vlad launched a series of savage raids into southern Transylvania. The violence was calculated. He sought to punish the Saxon cities, enforce his trade dominance, and eliminate dynasty support. His campaigns in the region were marked by the most notorious displays of his preferred method of execution, impalement. The villages and suburbs surrounding Brasov and Sibiu bore the brunt of his rage. Scene 19. The Executioner's Art, Impalement as Policy. Impalement was not unique to Vlad, but he elevated its use from a deterrent into a defining instrument of state policy and psychological warfare. His execution sites were spectacles designed not only to kill the victims but to terrorize the spectators and send an unmistakable message. The method was deliberately slow and agonizing. Victims were typically stripped, and a thick, blunt stake, often greased, was carefully inserted, usually rectally, but sometimes vaginally or through the abdomen. The bluntness of the stake was crucial. It was designed to avoid piercing any vital organs immediately. The stake was then raised vertically. Gravity would slowly pull the victim's body down, often taking hours or even days to fully penetrate the body and emerge through the shoulder or neck. The pain was unimaginable. This prolonged suffering was the core of Vlad's deterrent. For Vlad, the effectiveness of the method was twofold. It was an absolute physical end to his enemies, and a maximum psychological shock to anyone contemplating disobedience. It was the ultimate statement that lawlessness and betrayal would be met with an inevitable, agonizing end. Scene 20. The Forest of the Impaled, Psychological Warfare. Nowhere was this strategy more chillingly deployed than during the 1462 Ottoman invasion led by Sultan Mehmed II. Facing an army vastly superior in number, Vlad understood that he could not win through conventional military might alone. He needed to break the Sultan's will. As the massive Ottoman force marched toward the Wallachian capital of Targoviste, they encountered a sight that reportedly stunned even the seasoned Sultan: the Forest of the Impaled. Stretching for miles, A truly vast field was lined with thousands of impaled bodies, Ottoman soldiers and Turkish civilians captured during Vlad's earlier Danube raids. Estimates of the victims often reached 20,000. The sheer scale of the atrocity was unprecedented. The bodies were often arranged in patterns, sometimes with the stakes bearing placards detailing the victim's supposed crime. The spectacle was not just to display cruelty, it was a deliberate act of biowarfare, polluting the minds of the Ottoman troops with dread, and the air with the stench of death and decay. This act contributed significantly to the demoralization of the Ottoman army. Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, reportedly commented that he could not hope to rule a land protected by such a man, turning back from Targoviste without committing to a full siege. The Impaler's psychological warfare had achieved what his small army could not. It halted the Sultan's advance and saved Wallachia, temporarily, from complete conquest. Part 6. The Historical, Cultural, and Mythological Aftermath. Scene 21. The Fortress and the Grave, Archaeological Mysteries. Vlad's two enduring physical monuments are shrouded in as much myth as his life. The spectacular Panari Citadel, perched precariously atop a sheer cliff face in the Carpathian Mountains, often called the real Dracula's castle, represents his tyrannical will. Legend claims Vlad forced the treacherous boyars to construct the remote fortress with their own hands as punishment. While the core structure predates Vlad, he certainly reinforced and expanded it, making it one of his primary strongholds and a symbol of his power and isolation. Its sheer inaccessibility made it an ideal refuge during times of crisis. Equally mysterious is his final resting place. The traditional location is Snagov Monastery, situated on an island in a lake north of Bucharest. An excavation in the 1930s uncovered an empty grave and another containing the richly dressed remains of a man, possibly a prince, but definitive proof that this was Vlad the Impaler remains elusive. Other theories place his grave in Kamana Monastery, or simply state that his body was left to rot on the battlefield after his head was sent to the Sultan. This lack of certainty only reinforces his legendary status, allowing his spirit to continue to roam the valleys and mountains he once ruled. Scene 22. Propaganda and the printing press. Conversely, the Slavic accounts, preserved in Russian manuscripts, told a different story. While acknowledging his extreme cruelty, they framed it within the context of Christian morality and political necessity. In these tales, Vlad's impalements were acts of divine justice, aimed at purifying a corrupt and treacherous society. He was portrayed as a stern, but ultimately just, ruler necessary to defend the Orthodox faith against the Ottoman threat. The contrast is stark. For the Germans, he was a monster. For the Slavs and, eventually, the Romanians, he was a paragon of sovereignty, his brutality excused by the magnitude of the external threat and the internal corruption he faced. The complex legacy of Vlad the Impaler was thus forged in the competing propaganda of his time. Scene 23. Bram Stoker's Count Dracula. The ultimate mythological leap occurred in the late 19th century. Bram Stoker, an Irish theatre manager and writer, sought a suitably ancient, noble, and sinister name for the vampire he was creating for his 1897 novel, Dracula. Stoker's research, primarily conducted in the reading rooms of the British Museum, led him to various books on Wallachia and Transylvania. Crucially, he discovered the name Dracula and the sensationalized stories of the Impaler's atrocities. Stoker did not create the vampire myth, which has roots in various European folklore, but he did fuse it indelibly with the historical Vlad. Importantly, Stoker shifted the setting of his fictional vampire from Vlad's actual domain of Wallachia to Transylvania, which sounded more exotic and mysterious to Victorian ears. The vampire Count Dracula became a composite character, taking the name and ruthless spirit of Vlad III and merging it with the folk tales of the undead, creating the world's most enduring horror figure. Scene 24. The unification and modern identity. Wallachia and Moldavia united in 1859 to form the basis of the modern Romanian state. Transylvania, however, remained under the control of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, its Romanian majority continuing to struggle for political rights against the Hungarian ruling class. The dramatic conclusion arrived after World War I in 1918, seizing the opportunity presented by the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Transylvania voted to unite with the Kingdom of Romania. The Great Union finally brought the lands of the Dacians, the Romans, and the medieval princes under one flag, creating the modern nation of Romania. Today, the people of Romania look at Vlad the Impaler not as a vampire, but as a symbolic progenitor of this unity. A fierce, if flawed, national father figure who embodied the necessary ruthlessness required to secure the nation's survival in a hostile world. His history, brutal and unyielding, is a profound source of national identity, inextricably linking the legends of the past to the sovereignty of the present. Part 7. Interview segments and conclusion. Scene 25. Expert perspectives. Vlad in context. Fictional historian 1 Dr. Corvin, historian, we must avoid moralizing history. Vlad's cruelty was not random, it was strategic. In the 15th century, when you are facing Sultan Mehmed II, the man who conquered Constantinople, you cannot afford to be a gentle monarch. You need absolute obedience from your subjects and terror in the hearts of your enemies. Impalement was a terrible price, but for many Romanians, it was the price of survival. Fictional archaeologist, Ms. Antonescu, the mystery of his burial is a gift to the myth. If we found a definitive grave, the story would end. But because we haven't, Vlad is still out there, in the hills, in the fog of Snagov. He is a ghost, and a ghost is a far more powerful symbol than a mere skeleton. Fictional folklorist, Professor Ionescu, Bram Stoker didn't just borrow a name, he inverted the historical hero. In Romanian folklore, Vlad the Impaler is the good tyrant. He purged the corrupt so the common man could be safe. The West turned him into the ultimate noble parasite. It is a fantastic irony, the defender of the people became the people's ultimate threat. Scene 26. The land today, living with the legend. Today, the castles stand, and the myths endure. Bran Castle, though only tenuously connected to Vlad, has become the global magnet for the Dracula myth, drawing millions to the majesty of Transylvania. Yet, the true history lies deeper, in the quiet ruins of Panari, the modest princely court of Targoviste, and the very soil of Wallachia. The true story of Vlad the Impaler is the story of his land. A territory perpetually caught between East and West, Roman heritage and Slavic influence, the cross and the crescent. Wallachia and Transylvania were not just settings for a blood tale, they were the essential, fiercely defended front line of medieval Europe. Final, contemplative monologue over sweeping shots of the mountains and the Danube, Vlad III Dracula, the son of the dragon, was a mirror of his time, brutal, necessary, and unforgettable. He was the product of a geopolitical crucible, an instrument of fear who wielded cruelty to serve a higher, often brutal, form of justice. He died fighting for the land that had exiled, imprisoned, and ultimately betrayed him. But in doing so, he left behind a history so compelling, so extreme, that it transcended the borders of Wallachia, leapt across the centuries, and gave birth to the legend that refuses to die. The vampire is fiction, the history is real, and it is the turbulent, defiant history of the land of Vlad the Impaler that will haunt us forever.